Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be practicing our parallel line proofs and just strengthen our reasoning skills and our proof skills in general. So in this lesson, we need to make sure that we are building a logical story and justifying all of our statements with appropriate reasonings. So your reasonings that you're using are always mathematical theorems, properties, or definitions that we know. So we're going to follow this kind of rule system when we're doing every single proof throughout the year. So you always start by labeling your diagram with your given info. Always write down the given statements, and then you're going to try to make some conclusions based off of your diagram and on your given information. And then after each step, you're going to go back and label your diagram more if there are more conclusions or more statements that you were able to make about it. So let's just get into some practice. So the first type of proof that you are going to be practicing today are proving angle measures given the fact that we have parallel lines. So remember, when you are given, if you know for a fact that lines are parallel, you can use all of the parallel line theorem. So you can use alternate interior, alternate exterior, corresponding angle theorem, and same side interior angle theorem as well to help you get some info about those angle measurements. And again, the only reason that you're able to do this is if you for sure know that your lines are parallel, which guess what? In this question, we have that. So given M is parallel to N, we're going to prove that Y equals 144 degrees. So all of our proofs are starting with statement and reason. We are writing down our given info, which is just one thing in this case, which is nice. And our reason for that first statement is always given. So we want to prove that y is equal to, and we're going to change this. This shouldn't be 144. This should actually be 136. So fix that in your note packet. All right, so we know that our lines are parallel. We want to label that using appropriate markings. Now, the first thing that I like to do, and this is the advice I give you guys when you're trying to build your story, I would fill in my vertical angles if they are going to help me here. Now here, they would help me, right? So I already have 136 degrees there. So I know that angle X here also has to be 136 degrees, right? So my statement that I can make there, once I make a conclusion in my diagram, I have to write a statement for it. So I know that X equals 136 degrees. And how did I know that? Well, we use the fact that vertical angles are congruent. Now we want to prove that y is 136 degrees. Well, I know that my lines are parallel, so if you have that, it should be a dead giveaway that you're going to try to find your z angles, your f angles, or your u angles. So I have this angle here, and I want to be able to somehow make a conclusion about angle y. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I see a z, a backwards z, but still a z. And I see that my angles are the inner corners of my z, right? So I know that I have an alternate interior angle pair here. And we know our lines are parallel. So if we know our lines are parallel and we have alternate interior angles, well, guess what? We know that they're congruent, right? So our third statement is, hey, y equals 136 degrees. And our reasoning for that is alternate interior angles are congruent when lines are parallel. And you want to make sure that you are leaving no room for error, right? You don't want to just write alternate interior angles because that's not enough. Because even if the lines weren't parallel, they'd still be alternate interior angles. But since they're parallel, we know that they're congruent, okay? All right, type 2 is when we're going to be not given the fact that we have parallel lines, but we're going to be trying to prove that. So in here, there was like an error, so make sure you are writing this. So it should say, given angle 1 equals 75 degrees, and that's this angle right here, angle 1. Given angle 2 equals 85 degrees, and angle 2 is going to be this one right here. So here's angle 1, here's angle 2. And what we're going to want to do is prove that M is parallel to N. So make sure you are pausing and writing that in. And we're going to go ahead and label these angles too, 1, 2, 3, because those will help us out later on. So again, our first step in our proof is we are writing a statement and a reason chart. Write down our given information. Here we have a couple things. Angle 1 is 75. Angle 2 is 85. Got to make sure we're writing both of those. And our reason is just given. Wonderful. Okay. So our next step is to try to use what we can, right? We want to prove that lines M and N are parallel to one another. Now, a lot of times there are going to be different routes you can go when you're trying to do your proof, but there definitely will be some routes that are more beneficial than others. All right, so the first thing that I would do here, I would try to label my vertical angles to see if that would help me anywhere. So I'm going to use this 75-degree angle here, and I'm going to fill in the vertical angle over here. So I know that angle 2 is also 75 degrees. So in my statement, angle 2 is 75 degrees, and how did we know that? Well, we use the fact that vertical angles are congruent. All right. Now, the route that I'm thinking right now, I see that this angle is filled in as 75, and I see that this is 85, and that's an angle pair. I recognize that, right? I recognize that if I highlight, I can see that these are same side interior angles. Now, I remember that if my same side interior angles, and I'll just write if same side interior angles are congruent, then I know that my lines are parallel, right? Then I know M would be parallel to N. So, not that they're congruent, if they're supplementary, sorry. And remember, supplementary means that they add to 180. Do 75 and 85 add to 180? They do, right? So my third thing then, my same side interior angles are supplementary, so I know that M is parallel to N. And the reason there is because my same side interior angles are supplementary. Now, again, if the lines weren't parallel, I'm going to have to write supplementary. So if our lines weren't parallel, we'd still have our same side interior angles, but the fact that they're supplementary means that our lines must be parallel. All right, now we're going to learn transitive property. So transitive property simply says that if A is congruent to B and B is congruent to C, then A would be also congruent to C. So I think it helps to just draw some angles out here. So let's say we have angle 1, angle 2, and angle 3, right? So transitive property says that, hey, if I know angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, and then separately I know angle 2 is congruent to angle 3, then we can just go the whole route, right? We can also say that 1 is congruent to 3. Now this also works with segments. So if you have 3 segments here, and you know that segment 1 is congruent to segment 2, and if you labeled that, right? And then if you knew that segment 2 was also congruent to segment 3, then it makes sense. They're all congruent, right? So that would also mean that segment 1 is congruent to segment 3 as well. So you might see this, you might have to use it in a proof, and your reason here would just be transitive property. So let's actually try that. Let's see what it looks like. So given angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, and 2 is congruent to 3, prove that angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. So again, statement reason, we're writing out all of our given statements. Angle 1 congruent to angle 2, angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. And our reason is given. All right, so we have angle 1 being congruent to angle 2. We want to label that. We're labeling our given. So that would be 1 arc mark, right? Then we also know that angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. So that would also be 1 arc mark, right? So you can kind of visibly see after labeling that, hey, angle 1 is also congruent to angle 3. So there's nothing you really even have to do here. You literally just have to say angle 1 is congruent to angle 3. And the reason we're able to say that is because of the transitive property that we just developed. So your transitive property proofs will never be like this straightforward, but it's just getting an idea of when you might be able to apply it.